The first strange thing was the bridle. Not the boy. Ragged boys came through the Wind River country all the time in 1883. Some were looking for work, some were looking for trouble. Most were looking for food and trying not to call it that. But a boy walking into cattle country with a bridle in his hand and no horse behind him meant one of three things: bad luck, a lie, or a story too expensive to tell. Miriam Harrow saw him from the wash table window just after sunup. He was coming up the freight road alone, one hand closed around a cracked leather bridle, the reins dragging in the dust like the shadow of an animal that was no longer there. He was young, 19 perhaps, maybe 20 if hunger had sharpened him older than God intended. His hat had lost its shape. His coat was mended at both elbows with brown flour sack. One boot had been wrapped with rawhide around the sole, and every step told the truth before his mouth ever could. He had walked a long way. Behind Miriam, her husband Abel sat at the kitchen table with the winter accounts spread in front of him. Abel had built Red Lantern Creek out of scrub timber, creek mud, borrowed nails, and 36 years of refusing to quit. He had not been a soft man when he was young. Age had not made him soft now. It had only made him quieter when the numbers were bad, and lately the numbers were always bad. "Someone on the road," Miriam said. Abel did not look up. "On horse?" "No." That lifted his eyes. In their part of Wyoming territory, a man without a horse was either desperate, dangerous, or dead soon. The boy at the gate seemed to know that. He stopped before touching the latch, took off his hat, and waited to be seen properly. Miriam opened the door before Abel could tell her not to. "Ma'am," the boy said. His voice was rough from cold and dust, but polite in the old way, as if manners were the last clean thing he owned. "What do you need?" Miriam asked. "Work if you've got it." "We don't pay wages." "I'm not asking wages." Abel's chair scraped behind her. The boy's eyes moved past her, took in Abel, then came back to Miriam. Not quick, not nervous, just careful. He was thin, but not weak. There was a purple bruise under one eye that had begun to yellow at the edge. On his right palm, where the bridle leather crossed his skin, an old rope burn had split open again. Abel came to the door. "What's your name?" "Jonah Kade." "Where's your horse, Jonah Kade?" For the first time, the boy looked down at the bridle in his hand. "Gone." "That isn't an answer." "No, sir," Jonah said. "It's just the part I can say without standing here too long." Abel did not like that. Miriam could see it in his jaw. They had taken in hands before. One drank the lamp oil because he thought there was whiskey hidden in it. One stole 2 blankets and a shotgun. One worked well for 9 days, then vanished with a saddle cinch, a silver spoon, and Miriam's only good comb. Abel had learned the price of pity. Jonah seemed to feel the door closing before anyone moved. "I know cattle," he said quickly. "Fence, water, winter feed, calving, horses if you still keep any. Your lower gate is sagging because the hinge pin is wearing through. The creek trough is spilling out the back seam. And the cattle in that west flat are bunched too tight for this hour, which means something's pushing them off the grass." Abel's eyes narrowed. Miriam turned toward the pasture. At first, she saw nothing but morning light. Then the sound reached them. Not the lazy complaint of cattle waiting for feed. This was higher, sharper. The sound of animals being driven where they did not want to go. Jonah put his hat on. "Your west wire is down," he said, "or will be in the next minute." Abel was already reaching for his coat. Jonah looked at him, then at the old sorrel standing in the small pen by the barn. "I need that horse." Abel stared at him. "I don't know you." "No, sir," Jonah said, "but your cattle don't know that." There are decisions a man makes after thinking, and there are decisions that leap out of him because the land has shouted louder than suspicion. Abel pointed at the sorrel. Saddle's on the peg. Jonah moved. Miriam followed as far as the yard fence. She watched the boy cross the dirt without wasting one motion. He did not throw the bridle aside. He hung it on a post, took Abel's tack, and had the sorrel saddled before Abel reached the barn door. Then he was up and gone. The old cattle dog Nell, who usually trusted no one without 3 weeks of investigation and at least one biscuit, looked once at Abel, once at Miriam, and bolted after the stranger as if she had been waiting for him all her life. Abel said nothing. Miriam held the top rail with both hands and listened. The bawling rose beyond the low ridge. Then came hoofbeats, not scattered now, but gathering. The sound folded in on itself, tightened, became order. 26 minutes later, Jonah Kade came back over the ridge with 47 head in front of him. All 47. Miriam counted twice because she did not believe the first count. Nell worked the left edge of the herd with furious importance, tongue out, ears forward, happier than Miriam had seen her in 2 years. Jonah never shouted. He used the sorrel like a hinge, leaning the herd away from the draw, letting the leaders think the decision had been theirs. By the time the cattle were through the north gate, they were almost calm. Jonah swung down, closed the latch, and handed Abel the reins. "Not coyotes," he said. "Wires broken where the wash cuts under the cedar, but something shoved them before they hit it. A badger hole opened under the fence line, maybe, or men crossed there in the dark. I'd walk it before noon." Abel looked at the cattle, then at the boy, then at the bridle hanging on the post. "You hungry?" "Yes, sir." "There's a lean-to room behind the tack wall. Roof leaks when rain blows east." Jonah nodded. "I've slept under less roof than that." "Supper is when the light leaves the yard," Miriam said. "Not when you feel like coming." "Yes, ma'am." She watched him untack the sorrel, rub the horse's neck before turning him loose, check each hoof, coil the reins correctly, and return Abel's saddle exactly where he had found it. Every movement had the quiet grammar of someone raised around work. Not taught yesterday, raised. That was how Jonah Kade stayed at Red Lantern Creek. Not by asking twice, by arriving with nothing in his hands but a bridle for a lost horse, then saving 47 head before breakfast. In the weeks that followed, he proved less like a hired hand than a second set of eyes the ranch had been missing. He replaced the lower gate pin with a piece of wagon iron he cut, heated, and hammered in Abel's forge. He dug out the creek trough and rebuilt the back seam with clay, gravel, and lime, so the water no longer disappeared into the mud. He walked the west line with pliers and wire until his fingers bled through the rope burn. He found 3 weak posts, one place where snow melt had eaten under the fence, and a section of trail in the cottonwoods where riders had been crossing the property without permission. He said that last part quietly. Abel heard it anyway. "Coulter's men," Abel said. Jonah was tightening wire and did not look over. "That the man trying to buy you?" Miriam, who had come out with coffee, stopped. Abel stared at the boy. "Who told you that?" "No one. The way the tracks cut around the water tells me whoever crossed there knows the creek is why this place matters." Abel took the coffee from Miriam and said nothing for a long time. Bram Coulter owned nothing large enough to impress a man like Abel, which was exactly why he wanted Red Lantern Creek. He had bought 2 failed homesteads downriver. He had a small freight contract and a habit of wearing city collars in cow country. Most importantly, he had heard that the Harrows were old, the herd was light, and their daughter Ruth was buried under a willow behind the barn. Ruth had been the one who could work a horse sideways through willow brush. Ruth had known when the creek would rise by the smell of thawing mud. Ruth had died 3 springs earlier trying to free 2 calves caught in flood timber, and after that, the ranch still stood, but it no longer stood straight. Coulter understood weakness. Men like him always did. He had made Abel 2 offers for the ranch. The first came with a handshake. The second came with 2 armed riders waiting behind him, and the suggestion that winter changed a man's mind. Abel had answered the second offer with a rifle across both forearms. That had been in August. Since Jonah arrived, Abel watched the road more often. Jonah noticed that too, but he did not ask questions unless the answer helped the work. At supper he was quiet. He ate slowly, as if food required respect. He thanked Miriam every night. He never walked into the house without being invited. He never reached for more bread until Abel pushed the plate his way. Yet he studied everything: where the hay was stacked, which cows favored which side, how the wind came down through the notch before snow, which stretch of creek froze first, which pasture Abel refused to use until late because Ruth had always said grass there needed patience. The questions came one at a time, not greedy, rooted. Miriam saw Abel answer more than he meant to. A man can keep his mouth closed around grief for years, but land questions pry open doors that sympathy never touches. One evening in November, snow came sideways from the north and sealed the windows with white breath. After supper, Abel cleaned a rifle he did not need to clean. Miriam mended a shirt by lamplight. Jonah sat near the stove with Nell's head on his boot. The cracked bridle hung on a nail by the tack room now. Miriam had seen him put it there the 3rd week. She looked at him over her spectacles. "What happened to the horse?" Abel's hand stopped on the rifle cloth. Jonah's face changed so little that most people would have missed it. Miriam did not. He looked at the stove. "Her name was Mercy," he said. "She was my father's mare before she was mine." No one spoke. "We had a place in Nebraska. Not much. 160 acres and enough cattle to call ourselves ranchers if nobody asked too closely." He gave a small, humorless breath. "My mother died when I was 13. My father and I kept it going until the winter of '80, bad hay year. Then lung fever took the calves. I borrowed to buy feed because I thought pride was a plan." Abel lowered the rifle cloth. Jonah kept looking at the stove. "By spring, the note was bigger than the land. The bank took the place. Mercy was the last thing I owned worth selling, and I couldn't sell her. So I rode until she couldn't. Then I walked her until she couldn't. Then I buried her beside a creek I didn't know the name of." His hand closed once, empty, as if the bridle were still there. "I kept the bridle because I didn't know what else to do with my hands." The wind pressed against the house. Miriam set her mending down. "You've been carrying the last thing that proved you once belonged somewhere," she said. Jonah looked at her then. He did not cry. Not then. But his eyes held the shine of a man standing at the edge of it. "I guess I have." Abel looked toward the dark window. Snow moved across the glass like ash. "Belonging is a dangerous thing," he said. "Makes a man stay when leaving would hurt less." Jonah nodded. "Yes, sir." That was all they said, but after that night, Abel stopped calling him boy. Coulter came back 12 days before Christmas. Not at noon like an honest visitor. At first light, when the ranch was still blue with cold and the smoke had only begun to lift from the kitchen chimney. 3 riders came up the road. Bram Coulter in front, wrapped in a wool coat too fine for the weather. Behind him were 2 men Miriam had seen in Lander the month before, the kind who leaned against walls and saloons, with their thumbs hooked near their belts, and watched other people's fear for wages. Abel went for the rifle. Miriam put a hand on his arm. "Wait." "I've waited. That is why I'm saying it." Jonah was already in the yard. He had come from the barn with his coat open, hair still damp from breaking ice in the trough. Nell stood beside him, low and rigid, her growl barely more than weather. Jonah walked to the gate without hurry, not slow enough to insult, not fast enough to fear. Coulter looked down from the saddle. "I came to speak to Abel Harrow." Mr. Harrow is eating breakfast. Coulter smiled a little. Then fetch him. No. The two riders behind Coulter shifted. Jonah rested one hand on the gate rail. If you have business with Red Lantern Creek, you can say it from there. And who exactly are you? Jonah Kade. I run the stock and water here. That was not fully true, but it was true enough to change the shape of the morning. Coulter's eyes flicked to the barn, the fence repairs, the rebuilt trough, the cattle standing calm near the feed rack. I see Harrow found himself a stray, he said. Jonah did not move. Strays know fences, he said, better than men who only cross them. Miriam, listening from the porch, felt Abel go still beside her. Coulter's smile thinned. This ranch is failing. Harrow knows it. His wife knows it. Winter knows it. I am prepared to make an offer before the season makes a worse one. Then write it down, Jonah said, fold it twice, and take it home. The rider on Coulter's left laughed once. The other did not. Coulter leaned forward. Young man, you are standing between an old couple and common sense. No, Jonah said. I'm standing between you and water you don't own. Silence took the yard. There are sentences that reveal more than they threaten. Coulter's face showed that Jonah had chosen one. The creek was the truth of Red Lantern Creek. The house could rot. The barn could burn. Cattle numbers could fall. But the creek, with its year-round spring seep and the old ditch Ruth had kept clear, made the land worth more than its fences suggested. Coulter wanted the ranch, but what he truly wanted was the water. Jonah looked past him to the two riders. There are 3 of you. There is 1 of me at this gate. There is an old man on that porch with a rifle, and 36 winters of being pushed by weather, debt, and grief. If I were you, I would not be the man who gives him a cleaner target than life ever did. No one moved. Nell's growl became audible. Coulter looked to the porch. Abel stood there with the rifle low, not aimed, which somehow made it worse. This is not finished, Coulter said. Jonah nodded. Most bad things aren't. Coulter turned his horse. The 3 men rode out beneath a sky the color of pewter. Only when the sound of them faded did Abel lower the rifle. That night he brought out the brown bottle Miriam had not seen since Ruth's funeral. He set 2 glasses on the table. Miriam went to the cupboard, took down a third, and placed it beside them. Abel looked at it. She looked back. He poured. Jonah touched his glass, but did not drink. You should have let me handle him, Abel said. No, sir. Abel's eyes lifted. Jonah swallowed. He came hoping you would. Men like that know anger is cheaper than paperwork. If you had raised that rifle, he could make you the danger. If I stood there calm, he had to show what he wanted. Miriam watched Abel absorb that. Age had not stolen his courage. It had stolen his margin. That was harder for a proud man to admit. Abel turned the glass in his hands. I am 64 years old, he said. I have 520 acres, 47 head, a creek, a barn that sags on the north wall, and a wife who has done more work than any woman should have had to do since our girl died. Miriam said, Careful. I am being careful. He looked at Jonah. I cannot carry this place alone much longer. I have known it since the flood took Ruth. I just kept pretending knowledge and acceptance were the same thing. Jonah's face tightened. I lost my father's place because I thought asking for help made me less his son, he said. I won't stand here and watch another ranch get taken because a man is tired and too proud to say it. Abel's jaw worked once. Then he looked at Miriam. 38 years of marriage passed between them without a sound. Abel reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Not legal, not yet. Just a page from the ledger. I wrote this after you fixed the trough, he said. Changed it 3 times. Tore it up twice. He pushed the paper across the table. Jonah did not touch it. "What is it?" "An offer." Miriam watched the boy's hands go still. "Stay through winter," Abel said. "Not as a hand, as partner in waiting. If we come through spring with the herd sound and the creek ditch intact, I'll have Connolly and Lander draw it properly. 25% of Red Lantern Creek operations. Stock, hay, waterwork, decision rights. Not the house, not Miriam's garden, and not Ruth's willow." Jonah stared at him. "In 7 years," Abel continued, "or sooner if my knees decide they're older than I am, you get first right to buy more at a price written while I'm still clear enough not to be frightened into foolishness." The stove popped. Jonah looked down at the paper as if it might burn him. "Why?" "Because you see the place," Abel said. "Not just what it is, what it needs." He cleared his throat. "And because my daughter is dead, and this ranch still has to live." For a long moment, Jonah did not move. Then he put one hand over the paper. "I'll earn every inch." Abel nodded. "That is the only kind worth having." Miriam lifted her glass. "To winter, then." No one smiled. Not quite, but something unclenched in the room. By January, winter had found every weakness the ranch possessed. The creek crusted thick at the edges. The water line to the near trough froze twice. Wind stripped heat from the house so hard that Miriam slept with her stockings on. Hay disappeared faster than arithmetic promised. One red cow went down in a drift, and Jonah spent half a night with Abel dragging her out by lantern light, cursing, sweating, praying, and finally laughing from exhaustion when she stood up and sneezed hay into Jonah's face. They did not speak much about partnership after that. They simply lived it. Abel decided less by habit. Jonah asked less like a guest. Miriam watched them argue over feed rotation, then find the answer in the mud on their boots. She watched Jonah move Ruth's old saddle from the back beam, clean it, and hang it where it would not mildew. He did not ask to use it. He only saved it from rot. That mattered. In late February, Coulter returned with a lawyer. This time he came in daylight, with ink instead of hired guns. The lawyer was small, cold, and certain. He carried a document claiming a prior easement along the creek crossing, based on a freight path that had existed before Abel built the ranch fence. Abel read 3 lines and went red. Coulter looked pleased. Jonah took the paper gently from Abel's hand and read it all. Then he said, "This names the old freight cut below the Cottonwood Bend." The lawyer blinked. "Correct." The creek shifted east in the flood of 76. Abel turned toward him. Jonah kept reading. "The old crossing is dry ground now, 30 yards west of the present ditch head. You can cross there if you want. You'll get dust on your boots and no water." Coulter's smile vanished. The lawyer frowned at the document, then at the creek line beyond the barn. Miriam almost laughed. Ruth had known that. Abel had known it once, before grief turned every Coulter visit into a threat and not a puzzle. Jonah had learned it by asking why grass grew wrong near the old cottonwoods. The lawyer asked to see the place. Abel said, "Gladly." They walked it in a wind sharp enough to cut paper. Jonah found the old rut under snowgrass. Abel found the half-buried stone Ruth had used to mark the shift. Miriam stood by the ditch head with Nell and watched Coulter understand, slowly and bitterly, that he had paid for the wrong certainty. The lawyer folded the paper. "This claim is less useful than represented." Coulter looked at Jonah. "You think you're clever." "No," Jonah said. "I think water leaves records. Men just forget to read them." Coulter left again. This time he did not promise to return. Spring came in pieces. First the thaw stink from the low pasture, then the drip off the barn roof. Then one morning, green appeared under the snow like a secret the earth had failed to keep. The herd came through lean but living. 47 head became 49 when 2 calves dropped in the first warm week of April. The repaired trough held. The west fence stood. The ditch ran clear enough that Abel watched it for 10 minutes without speaking. The partnership papers arrived from Lander in a brown envelope. Abel signed first. Miriam signed as witness. Jonah held the pen too hard. "You can breathe," Miriam said. He did, and made his mark. Not a cross, his full name. Jonah Elias Kade. Afterward, Abel took the cracked bridle from the tack room nail and handed it to him. Jonah looked at it, confused. "I thought you might want it back," Abel said. Jonah ran his thumb over the split leather. For a moment, Miriam saw the road in him again, the hungry miles, the lost mare, the creek with no name, the boy who had carried proof of belonging because he did not have the thing itself. Then Jonah walked to the barn wall and hung the bridle on a better nail. "No," he said, "it can stay there." That evening, Miriam found him by the west gate, where he had saved the herd his first morning. The sun had fallen low behind the ridge, and the creek shone like a blade of light through the pasture. Nell lay in the grass near his boots, pretending not to sleep. Miriam leaned on the rail beside him. "You wrote a letter today," she said. Jonah smiled faintly. "You see everything." "Only what people leave where I can find it." "To my sister," he said. "She married East before the bank took the place. I told her I had work." Miriam waited. He looked over the pasture. "No, I told her I had a place." Miriam nodded. Below them, 49 cattle moved through new grass. Abel's voice came from the barn, complaining at a gate latch that had offended him personally. The house windows held the last of the sun. Ruth's willow bent over the rise in the same wind that moved through everything else. Grief had not left Red Lantern Creek. It never would. But grief was no longer the only thing with a chair at the table. There was work again. Argument. Coffee before daylight. A dog with purpose. A young man who had stopped carrying a bridle because the barn had a nail for it now. Jonah watched the creek until the light thinned to silver. "I didn't know the drifting was over when I walked in," he said. Miriam looked at the gate, at the fence he had repaired, at the land that had nearly been bought for the price of their exhaustion. "Nobody does," she said. "Not at the moment it ends." The wind came down from the ridge, soft with thaw, and in the barn behind them, the cracked bridle hung still on its nail. No longer a memory of the horse that was gone, but proof that Jonah Kade had finally found something strong enough to hold what was left of him.